Hello everybody, this is He Who Dwells. Today I wanted to kick off a new series of videos in which I take two characters from fiction and, through power scaling, analyze their abilities, skills, and feats to determine who would come out victorious in combat. And what better way to start off the series than with a matchup that has been done to death on YouTube, Comic Vine, Versus Battles, and virtually every other debate platform on the internet, Cole MacGrath vs Alex Mercer. I originally planned on making this video a while ago, before Crisis already released his own version on his channel, which you can check out in the description. However, after milling it over, I decided to go ahead and give a more in-depth analysis on this matchup, as while I think Crisis and Chadwick did a good enough job covering it in their video, I also feel like there are a lot of variables they looked over that I believe are worth addressing. To start off, let's begin with a brief summary of both characters' backgrounds and histories. Cole MacGrath is the original protagonist of the inFAMOUS series. He was a simple bike messenger before delivering a mysterious package called the Ray Sphere, which changed his life forever, in a violent explosion which claimed over 10,000 lives and left him in critical condition. After the explosion, the city believed that Cole was the one who triggered the blast and labeled him a terrorist. He is then stuck in a dying city controlled by gangs with his best friend Zeke Dunbar and his girlfriend Trish, who despises him and blames him for the death of her sister, who died in the blast. Throughout Cole's adventures in Empire City, he was haunted by the mysterious leader of the First Sons organization, Kessler, who seemed to know Cole on a personal level. After subjecting Cole to numerous tests of endurance and character, such as turning his best friend against him and forcing him to choose between saving the love of his life or hundreds of civilians, the two engaged in a final battle in the crater of the Ray Sphere. After a hard-fought battle, Cole emerged victorious, and Kessler had revealed with his dying breath that he was an alternate future version of Cole, come to prepare him for the advent of a creature bent on the destruction of all life, the Beast. From here, Cole must seek out more power to combat this monstrous threat, and in doing so will decide the fate of the entire world. Alex Mercer is the original protagonist of the Prototype series, a man who wakes up in a Gen-Tech morgue with bizarre and horrifying powers, and no knowledge of events prior to that point, aside from his name and that he was once a scientist. Confused, enraged, and determined to reclaim his past, he set out to do so by hunting down his old colleagues. In truth, the creature acting as the protagonist is not Mercer, but the Blacklight virus, which was released by the real Alex Mercer moments before he was shot dead and infected. The virus reanimated his corpse and came to believe that it was him. However, evidence suggests that their personalities differed quite sharply. As Mercer systematically hunted down the Gen-Tech and Blackwatch figureheads behind the creation of Blacklight and the military occupation of New York, he was finally able to discover the truth of how he came to be, and managed to prevent the city from being destroyed by a nuclear detonation. However, the hundreds of people Mercer had killed in his mission had him question his place among humanity, so he traveled the world in search of something to fight for. Everywhere Alex had went, he only saw humanity's selfishness and cruel, brutal nature, and after being betrayed by those he had grown close to, Mercer decided that humans were vermin, worse than worthless, and that the responsibility of ushering in a new, better world fell upon his shoulders. Now that we've gone over the backstories of these characters, let's move on to analyzing their individual feats and scaling of attack potency, durability, speed, and their combat skill and intelligence. In terms of power scaling, attack potency is an alternative term for destructive capacity, which has a much more direct meaning. The destructive capacity that an attack is equivalent to. A character with a certain degree of attack potency does not necessarily need to cause destructive feats on that level, but can cause damage to characters that can withstand such forces. As such, it isn't proof of a low attack potency if a character's attacks only cause a small amount of destruction. For one example of this was pre-Crisis Superman being able to destroy a structure that could withstand the Big Bang, which would place his attack potency at least universe level. This doesn't necessarily mean that Superman could destroy the entire universe with a single punch, but that his punches are powerful enough to damage and destroy characters and objects that can withstand universe level forces. In addition, for the sake of better organization, I will also be grouping durability together with attack potency, as, logically, characters capable of physically achieving a certain degree of energy output must be able to at least withstand a comparable amount of damage or their bodies would break apart from the strain and automatic counterforce whenever they exert themselves. For this reason, I'll be considering feats of durability as comparable to attack potency, and vice versa, unless the two are specified to be separate, or one specified to be superior to the other. Now, with explanations out of the way, let's see where Cole and Alex stand in terms of attack potency and durability. One of Cole's most impressive feats of durability occurs during the opening of the original inFAMOUS. As the catalyst of his powers, the ray sphere generated a massive explosion upon activation, which vaporized a 6-city block radius in Empire City, killing 10,000 people in the process. However, Cole, despite being caught in the epicenter of the explosion, survived. Most people try to make the argument that the ray sphere doesn't apply to Cole's durability, since it was meant to awaken the conduit's powers. However, as we see in the beginning of inFAMOUS 1 and in the post-blast graphic novel, Cole was severely injured by the blast, having suffered deep lacerations and third-degree burns all over his body, as well as having half his face scarred and limping his way towards the bridge in the opening. He is even temporarily medically dead a few days later as a result of his injuries, surviving due to the electricity in his body acting as a defibrillator to resuscitate him. Even Kessler, his own future self, who spent several decades perfecting the device and planning the entire first game's events, was afraid he wouldn't be strong enough to survive the blast. There is even more evidence in inFAMOUS 2, such as John White, despite being a conduit, is completely ripped apart atom by the ray sphere. Cole is able to be hurt by blast shard bombs, which are basically blast shards rigged to explode with ray field energy. Cole can shrug them off with ease, but still takes damage, which wouldn't be the case if ray field energy explosions truly had no effect on him. The beast ray field blast that creates a conduit sends him flying and temporarily knocks him out. Again, if it really had no effect, this wouldn't be the case. It is also implied in an inFAMOUS 2 dead drop that only exceptionally strong conduits are able to survive being at the epicenter of a ray sphere blast.
There was this kid right in the center of the crater. He had survived.
Conduit.
Oh yeah, a strong.
Not only that, but it also scales directly to Cole's attack potency, as he was able to easily destroy the ray sphere, which is completely undamaged by its own explosions. Given this evidence, it is more of a stretch to say that the ray sphere doesn't apply to Cole's durability than to say that it does. Now, for how much energy the explosion actually produced, it has been calculated by Versus Battle Wiki user The Perpetual using the average city block specs of 80 meters by 274 meters and a vaporization value of 25,700 joules per cubic centimeter to determine that the energy of the ray sphere blast to be roughly 55.09 megatons of TNT equivalent, or city level. And since Cole was at the epicenter of the blast, this means he was able to survive the full energy of the explosion, and was still fit enough to parkour through the city and destroy a bridge with a lightning storm immediately afterwards. Again, this feat also scales directly to his attack potency, as later in the game, his good karma counterpart was able to destroy the ray sphere in one shot, which was undamaged by the explosion, unlike the 6 city blocks around it. The lightning Cole produces is also powerful enough to sink an aircraft carrier and kill a mutant conduit that literally feeds off electricity to survive in a single blast, generating 4.7 megatons of electrical energy in the process, or small city level. Later on, Cole is able to go toe-to-toe with the Beast in combat, with the Beast having withstood a direct hit from a nuclear missile. This can be seen immediately after the explosion. The Beast's body is completely unscathed after being hit, and the most the impact of the explosion seems to do is bring him to his knees, before proceeding to teleport into the city moments later. In direct comparison, Cole's attacks are able to easily blast its body apart numerous times, even blowing its entire head off. To support this feat, the Beast is also able to easily destroy numerous cities along the East Coast in a single blast, with its destruction of Empire City being calculated at 1.4 gigatons of TNT equivalent, or large mountain level, and its subsequent destruction of Numerai generating 345 gigatons of energy, or large island level. Cole, likewise, is able to easily withstand these attacks, even when the Beast admitted that it had no control of itself at the time and was essentially bloodlusted. Cole was also able to overpower and kill Kessler, an alternate future version of himself with nearly a century of combat experience and knowledge of his powers. who was physically strong enough to generate earthquakes across a 6-block radius with a single punch, calculated to be between 15 kilotons and 15 megatons of TNT equivalent. However, after the fight, Kessler had implanted his memories into Cole's mind to show him the future and to aid him in defeating the Beast. Among these memories was the destruction of Earth's moon at the hand of the Beast, with it being stated in that very same shot that Kessler, at that moment in time, had the power to potentially defeat the Beast, or at least significantly harm it. If we take this statement at face value, this means Kessler, and by extension Cole, who was strong enough to fight, take hits, and kill Kessler, are powerful enough to damage multi-continent level beings. There are other feats to support this level of power as well, such as the Beast's creation of pseudo-black hole gravity singularities, and the RFI blast generated by Cole's energy at the end of inFAMOUS 2. However, these feats are not as consistent as the regular city-to-island level of power demonstrated by Cole and other inFAMOUS characters, and as such should be treated as an absolute high-end. In a similar fashion to Cole, one of Alex Mercer's most notable feats of durability also comes from an explosion at the outset of his adventures. In Mercer's first encounter with other blacklight creatures, he lures a pack of hunters into a military base, where he then ruptures a series of gas tanks to set off a chain reaction, killing the hunters and destroying the entire base, while he remains standing at the epicenter with no visible injuries. Now, at face value, this looks like a straightforward building level feat. However, these tearings aren't indicative of literal destruction, but are a rather broad range covering the total energy of a feat, and destroying objects and structures through different methods can produce widely varying results. For example, destroying a skyscraper through means of fragmentation, i.e. when the matter that was destroyed was turned into fairly large distinguishable pieces, which only produces an energy of 8 joules per cubic centimeter, may only be equivalent to large building level. However, destroying a skyscraper through the use of vaporization, when little to no remains of the matter can be seen, and when a considerable amount of vapor is present, producing a whopping 25,700 joules per cubic centimeter, this feat can be as high as small town level, or even the aforementioned Rakesphere blast completely vaporizing 6 city blocks and producing city-level equivalent energy. In terms of this particular feat, the explosion which destroyed the base, killed the hunters, and which Alex Mercer was completely undamaged by, was produced by the combustion of 6 gasoline tanks. For reference, a single gram of gasoline produces 4 to 5 to the 14th power joules of energy. With this in mind, the combustion of a standard gas tanker can produce a multi-city block level explosion. Using this, and by calculating the approximate amount of gasoline stored in each tank, which is also a low ball, considering they seem to produce thermobaric explosions similar to the thermobaric tank rounds. But since the chemicals used are unknown, we will assume standard gasoline as the fuel. Each tank contains about 6,118 gallons of gasoline, which would produce an average of 250 tons of TNT. Adding this all together, it was completely undamaged by a gasoline explosion equivalent to 1.49 kilotons of TNT, or small town level, while he was still relatively weak in power, at least compared to how much more powerful he'd become. Moving on to his more notable attack potency and durability feats, which are also much more controversial in versus battle circles, Alex Mercer, towards the end of the first prototype game, uncovers General Randall's plot to stop the Blacklight virus by destroying it along with New York City in a nuclear explosion. After having a final battle with the Supreme Hunter, Mercer emerges victorious and transports the bomb away from the city via helicopter, but is unable to escape in time and is caught in the blast, seemingly vaporized. It is then revealed that a small piece of Mercer's biomass survived the blast and made it back to shore, and was able to reconstitute the rest of its body after absorbing the biomass of a nearby crow. It has been widely debated among the versus battle community whether or not this feat should actually scale to Mercer, as not only was Mercer not at the epicenter of the blast, and thus was not even hit by the full energy of the explosion, but the energy that did affect him nearly vaporized his entire body, save for a small chunk of biomass. In comparison to the aforementioned feat of the Beast being nuked, the Beast was hit directly by a nuclear missile, meaning he tanked the full force of the explosion, and unlike Cole's electrical attacks, the explosion didn't do any visible damage to him except bring him to his knees. In the case of Alex Mercer, however, were it not for his regeneration abilities, he surely would have been killed by the explosion. However, there is reason to believe that perhaps Mercer became powerful enough to tank the explosion as his power grew over the course of the year leading up to Prototype 2. Let me explain. Prior to the fight with the Supreme Hunter, it reveals itself to Mercer for the purpose of consuming it, which it claims that doing so would allow it to withstand even this being the nuclear explosion. The key word the Supreme Hunter uses in this assertion is withstand, meaning to remain undamaged or affected by. If we were to take this statement at face value, this would mean that the Supreme Hunter, with Mercer's biomass, would be able to survive the explosion through its own durability, and, by extension, vice versa would be true as well. Now, people may object to this by saying that Mercer absorbed the Supreme Hunter, but was still vaporized by the explosion. But that would be incorrect, as it is clear from the cutscene after the Hunter is defeated, and Mercer's dialogue, that the Supreme Hunter was killed, and Mercer is unable to consume beings that are already dead. But if Mercer killed the Supreme Hunter and never absorbed him, you may be wondering how this statement could apply to Mercer at all. Well, Mercer becomes more and more powerful with every being he consumes, and over the course of the first Blacklight outbreak, he admits to consuming hundreds or even thousands of people. It wouldn't be unreasonable to assume that over the year between Prototype and Prototype 2, that Mercer has consumed many, many more individuals and added their strength and biomass to his own. In addition to this, in the final battle with James Heller in Prototype 2, Mercer consumes 8 of his evolved underlings, with each one having comparable strength to early game James Heller and himself from Prototype 1. With all this added biomass, it would stand to reason that by this point, you should have comparable strength to the Supreme Hunter, if not far greater, and should thus be capable of the Supreme Hunter's statement of withstanding the nuclear explosion that would destroy Manhattan, which calculations, using in-game measurements and the game over screen of the bomb detonating, place at small city to city level. This is also supported by how close Mercer already was to this range at the beginning of Prototype 1, due to the aforementioned gas tanker explosion feat, and the fact that the biomass Heller consumes from Mercer is enough to generate building-sized tendrils that cover Manhattan Island at supersonic speeds. With these feats in mind, Mercer, at an absolute low end, is casually building level, with his more impressive feats in scaling placing him at small town to city level. This also applies to his attack potency, as he is capable of damaging and carving up comparable opponents, such as the Supreme Hunter and James Heller. In terms of power scaling, speed is a much broader category than it seems, and is not just limited to how fast a certain character is able to travel from point A to point B. This particular speed category is what is referred to as travel speed. For power scaling purposes, the term speed is usually referred to the speed at which characters are capable of fighting at, as well as the speed at which a character can react to an event or action. These are referred to as combat and reaction speed. The reaction and combat speed of a character also tends to be higher than their movement speed. For example, while a character such as Batman is capable of consistently reacting to and dodging automatic gunfire, which travels at supersonic speeds, this does not mean that Batman is capable of traveling at supersonic speeds on foot, but rather that he is capable of reacting to attacks and objects traveling at those speeds from close range. Now, without further ado, let's move on to quantifying Cole and Alex's speed feats. Since the beginning of inFAMOUS 1, Cole MacGrath has showcased numerous feats of supersonic reaction and combat speed, such as regularly dodging gunfire from automatic turrets, Vulcan guns, and anti-aircraft cannons. He dodges and deflects incoming RPG rockets from close range, and was even able to outrace one with his induction grind and redirect it within inches of its target, easily placing him at Mach 1. As shown in the inFAMOUS 1 mission End of the Road and the evil ending of inFAMOUS 2, Cole is also able to tag and shoot down supersonic fighter jets with ease. MacGrath's more impressive feats of speed come from his battles with other conduits, namely Kessler and Nix. While fighting Kessler, Cole has showcased the reaction and movement speed to dodge Kessler's bolts of lightning at close range, even after they've been fired. Likewise, Cole is also able to keep up with Kessler, who can dodge his own lightning bolts. Using the average lightning speed of 4.4 to the 15 power meters per second, or Mach 1294, Cole and Kessler's reactions and combat speed have been calculated at 405,394 meters a second, or Mach 1191. To support these massively hypersonic speeds, Cole can also outrun point-blank grenade explosions at Mach 190. But Cole's most impressive speed feat comes from his fight with Nix during the evil ending of inFAMOUS 2. During their battle, Cole is able to dodge beams fired at him by the RFI, a device consistently stated to function through radiation, which, as electromagnetic radiation, travels at the speed of light. Taking the speed of these radiation beams into account and measuring the distance Cole moved to dodge it, this places Cole's reaction speed at 7 nanoseconds and his combat speed at 51.5% the speed of light, or baseline relativistic plus. This feat is also supported in the good ending, in which these beams are able to reach the upper atmosphere and knock out a distant satellite in seconds. Alex Mercer's superhuman speed is one of his most utilized physical enhancements, being able to casually run fast enough to run up walls and buildings, placing him between 200 to 500 miles per hour at minimum. He has also been stated by prototype executive producer Tim Benison to be able to outrun even the fastest vehicles in the game, which includes Boeing AH-64 Apache helicopters, which can reach speeds of 284 kilometers per hour, and F-35 fighter jets, which can reach 1,960 kilometers per hour, or Mach 1.6. In addition, Mercer, and even his weaker evolved minions, are able to produce sonic boom-esque shockwaves with their movements. In terms of reaction and combat speed, Mercer has consistently dodged and outran automatic gunfire multiple times, blocked grenade launcher and RPG shots, and moved from the top floor of an apartment to the ground level before Dana could react. His best feats of speed come from being able to dodge tank shells from M1 Abrams cannons, which can fire at speeds of Mach 4.6, as well as scaling to endgame James Heller, who he could fight evenly with and move faster than in short bursts. In comparison, Heller was able to jump above altocumulus Callistanus clouds in a single bound in the Red Zone trailer, which are usually 2 to 7 kilometers above ground level, given he reaches this height in 1.56 seconds. This puts Heller's speed, and Mercer's, at Mach 6.5, or hypersonic. Cole MacGrath is an extremely adaptable combatant, being able to easily identify and exploit an opponent's weaknesses. He is adept at using the environment to his advantage, such as using a fuel tank to blow off a Golem conduit's arm or set David Warner on fire, and using the flooded district of Floodtown to easily dispatch small armies of Wehrmacht 88. Cole can easily turn his enemies' attacks against themselves, such as deflecting the projectiles of Alden Tate and the Dustmen, or prematurely detonating Kessler and the First Son's mines and grenades. He can quickly and seamlessly combine his own powers in a variety of ways to creatively take down and suppress his opponents, such as bouncing and ricocheting grenades off walls, redirecting rockets around tight corners, and expertly shooting down enemies through minuscule spaces and openings with consecutive headshots. Cole has regularly outsmarted and outmaneuvered secret government agents, organizations 100 years more advanced than the rest of the world, highly trained and skilled Black Ops soldiers, and superpowered mercenaries hardened by years of combat experience. He has single-handedly fought off small armies, and has even defeated Kessler, his own future self with over a century's worth of knowledge and experience, and should possess this experience himself after receiving his implanted memories. As a human, Alex was a Gen-Tech scientist, having acquired a university and national level award. After acquiring his ability to absorb memories of biological beings via consumption, he now possesses the knowledge and memories of the thousands of people he's consumed. Connecting himself with the core hive mind allows him to access the memories of every person affected by the Blacklight virus. Mercer possesses extensive knowledge of biology from his past as a biochemist, and is knowledgeable in various other fields of science from consuming dozens of Gen-Tech scientists. Alex is also extremely well versed in military procedures, protocols, and combat tactics, and is fully capable of utilizing nearly any military asset, including tanks and helicopters, from consuming hundreds of Marines, Blackwatch soldiers, and military commanders. He can even shoot someone's vitals while moving at full speed and jumping over 30 feet into the air. Mercer has spent a year honing his evolved powers, being able to develop new weapons on the fly to combat Blackwatch and the Infected, and has even consumed Elizabeth Green, one of the first runners with over 60 years of experience with their evolved powers, being able to construct building-sized tendrils and control the entire Blacklight hive mind simultaneously. Now that we've gone over each character's quantifiable feats of attack potency, durability, speed, combat skill, and intelligence, let's analyze their unique powers and abilities to determine whose power set is better able to triumph over the other. Cole MacGrath's main power set revolves around the manipulation of electricity and electromagnetic fields. This gives Cole the ability to channel lightning in and out of his body. Cole can use this to a variety of means, one notable example being its use in hand-to-hand combat. Cole combines martial arts while electrifying his hands to fight his enemies. He can greatly improve the damage he can inflict by charging both of his arms with electric blades, potent enough to slice through mutants that feed off electricity. Cole later creates a 3-foot-long cattle prod-like weapon, which can conduct thousands of volts of electricity, which he uses to perform acrobatic takedowns and generate explosions. He possesses a radar pulse, which he uses to locate electric phenomena, such as energy sources, differentiate friend from foe, and keep track of unseen enemies, which also allows him to see through shapeshifting, disguises, and invisibility. He could use his powers telepathically by reading a person's thoughts through the neuroelectric energy absorbed through their synapses. He could read a memory of his choice, such as finding out how a person died or finding something they hid. He could also broaden this search to include the name of the victim, despite it not being uttered in the specific memory shown. Cole had gained a healing factor from the blast, being able to quickly heal any damage to his body in seconds. Due to his body's natural ability to heal being greatly accelerated through the stimulation of Cole's muscle tissues and his immune system when electricity isn't available, Cole was rendered impervious to most diseases, such as the extreme toxic gases deployed by the First Sons in Vermont 88. He was also able to easily resist direct exposure to Sasha's tar, which could not only mind control the entire 10.5 million population of Empire City, but could also immediately induce seizures upon contact, turn civilians into zombie-like creatures, and melt humans into piles of mush within seconds. His healing ability was greatly accelerated whenever he absorbed electricity. Cole's primary offensive ability was to fire an electrokinetic bolt of lightning out of his hands and onto any target that he was aimed to. This bolt passed a current through almost any target, stunning enemies, electrifying bodies of water, or charging up electric devices. Several variations of this attack included a continuous stream of lightning, a massive amount of energy concentrated into a single bolt, and a sniper-like bolt of electricity shot while speeding up Cole to a point where time appeared to slow down. This allows him to use electricity to generate magnetic and anti-magnetic effects. He can also charge himself with energy as he falls, creating a powerful explosion as he lands. With electromagnetism, Cole could perform several attacks with various uses. He could bind an explosive kinetic charge with electromagnetism, sticking to any enemies, bouncing off walls, and exploding a few seconds after impact. He could also trap a massive explosive charge into a swirling rocket-like mass that would explode on contact, and generate a shockwave that knocks targets into the air. Cole could also hover in the air and glide long distances using electromagnetism, and could grind along metallic wires, railings, and poles. Cole could also use magnetic fields and tethers to lift and throw any object, even non-magnetic ones, as well as pull enemies and objects towards himself, or himself to other locations. Cole had the ability to form a defensive barrier that can protect him from harm through the use of electromagnetism. Also, Cole possessed touch-related abilities, such as leeching an individual's bioelectricity to instantly restore his energy, heal damage, and switch off the target's bodily functions. He could restrain enemies through the use of electromagnetic shackles tied to the Earth's EM field, as well as use bioelectricity as a method of healing by hyper-stimulating cells into a rapid state of regeneration. Through the power transfer device, Cole gained abilities and attacks attributed to either napalm manipulation or cryokinesis. Several powers exhibited by Cole involve gliding at a low altitude while wrought in fire and spiking off a tall icicle from the ground, being able to jump greater heights. Several of these attacks were different variations of Cole's pre-existing powers, only done in their respective elements. Cole is also able to control weather phenomena and absorb ionic energy charges, which allows him to unleash a variety of devastating ultimate attacks, including a massive wave of sub-zero gas and giant icicles that damage or freeze solid anything in its path, an enhanced version of his bio-leech that absorbs the electrical energy of every living thing and object in a 20-meter radius, an electrical tornado that tears through the world, or calling down a hail of lightning from the sky to either strike a singular target or be steered directly to wreak havoc upon Cole's enemies. Alex Mercer's blacklight infection has granted him the ability to both shapeshift and fashion his body into biological weapons. These include massive blades, claws, enhancing his muscle mass to increase the power of his hand-to-hand strikes, and even further into giant masses called hammer fists to pummel the opposition into paste. His physical strength is augmented to the point of even being able to unleash shockwaves of force by thrusting his fist forward. Mercer can shift his arms into razor-sharp, flail-like whips, which can strike with incredible force, slice through flesh and steel like butter, and pull objects to himself or vice versa, giving him limited ranged combat and enhanced aerial combat capabilities. In a similar fashion, he can release tendrils which can latch onto targets and lash out to pull any nearby objects and enemies towards the target, crushing it under their weight and force. Alex has the ability to alter his own body's density. By using this, he can make himself dense enough to leave cracks in the ground by simply running, and create shockwaves by falling from sufficient heights. He's also able to make himself light enough to glide through the air long distances and jump up to 100 feet in a single bound. He can increase his body's density tenfold through the use of a sort of biomass armor, which heavily increases his defenses and allows him to bull rush anything in his path, though at the cost of his ability to glide. Mercer's most infamous power is the ability to absorb or consume any living biological beings and add their biomass, DNA, and essence to himself, copying and assimilating it in order to gain the entity's genetic memories and physical characteristics. This allows him to disguise himself as virtually anything he kills, from civilians to military and Blackwatch soldiers. In this manner, Mercer can infiltrate the military as one of them, duck out of sight and emerge as someone else to evade pursuit, and in general, avoid drawing attention by disguising himself as someone else. Mercer's senses are enhanced to far higher levels than those of the normal human, and potentially more, such as access to thermal vision, which is pretty self-explanatory, and infected vision, which allows Alex to detect the presence of the blacklight virus in individuals, allowing him to track infected targets easily and discern who is infected and who is not with just a glance. This also heightens his senses, allowing him to minimize the noise in the background of New York City. He later gains an improved viral sonar, a sixth sense that allows him to find a target and guide himself through the visual spectrum on a citywide scale. Due to the blacklight virus's ability to constantly evolve and the information presented in consumed biomass, Mercer can adapt to almost any situation. This is how he further hones his shapeshifting powers to better combat foes, unlocking his blade and armor powers after curing himself from the parasite and developing immunity to blood tox. During the second outbreak, he gained new abilities such as Pack Leader to command lesser infected, and even learned how to bestow a fraction of his powers onto his own personal spies and army. Alex can manipulate the blacklight virus inside him for his own advantage, such as killing anyone in his immediate vicinity through viral gas, or controlling the blacklight virus directly to infect others to gain similar powers to his, or turn them into many variations of infected, as well as manipulate the virus with a touch, spread the virus via every form of transmission, which produces hundreds of unique strands of itself on a daily basis, with some variants possessing a 99.999% mortality rate. Mercer also possesses regeneration abilities, which allows him to use reserve biomass to repair and reconstruct his body from any damage he sustains. This, notoriously, allowed him to regenerate after being reduced to a bloody pulp by a nuclear explosion, and he likely has comparable regeneration to the Supreme Hunter, who could reconstitute itself from a puddle of blood. However, as shown in both the instances of the nuclear explosion and his battle with James Heller, Mercer is unable to regenerate himself if too much biomass is expended, requiring him to absorb more in order to properly heal. In terms of traditional power scaling, without beating around the bush, Alex Mercer gets utterly stomped by Cole MacGrath. In terms of attack potency and durability, Even Cole's most low-end feats are superior to the high end of Alex Mercer's scaling. Even using the Supreme Hunter's statement of withstanding the nuclear explosion to scale evolved Mercer to city level, the exact value is only 8 megatons at most using in-game nuclear projections. Even the Ray Sphere blast Cole survives at the beginning of inFAMOUS 1, calculated at 55 megatons, is 6 times more powerful. This is without using his scaling to the Beast and Kessler, the former of whom can easily destroy cities with large mountain to large island level explosions and create multi-continent level singularities, while the latter is possibly comparable to the alternate timeline Beast who can destroy Earth's moon. When it comes to speed, Mercer likewise gets blitzed by Cole's superior reaction and combat speed. While both have showcased the speed to dodge automatic gunfire, rockets, missiles, and keep up with fighter jets, Cole has consistently been able to react to lightning bolts at quadruple-digit Mach speeds, as well as beams of radiation which travel at light speed and reach the exosphere in seconds. On the other hand, Mercer's greatest feat of speed comes from scaling to James Heller's jump into the red zone, which only reaches speeds of Mach 6. This places each character's respective top speed feats at a difference of nearly 69,000 times. If unequalized stats are used and we adhere to traditional power scaling, Cole would simply blast Mercer into chunks in pretty much a single attack, and the speeds that he would do so at would be 69,000 times faster than anything Alex has ever reacted to. And given how Alex is primarily a close-range fighter, and, adversely, Cole is a long-range combatant, he wouldn't even have the speed to be able to get close and actually do any damage, however minuscule, as Cole's superior speed and plethora of evasive and traversal powers would be more than enough to easily widen the gap between them and continue picking Mercer apart from a distance. It would only be a matter of time until Cole damages Mercer to the point of expending his biomass reserves and leaving him unable to regenerate himself back to a state where he can even continue to fight. However, if we were to equalize the character's stats, for example, assuming Cole MacGrath is as strong and fast as Alex Mercer, or if Alex Mercer were as strong and fast as Cole MacGrath, and we only account for their individual powers, abilities, and combat strategies, this is where the outcome of the fight is more up in the air. In terms of Alex Mercer's regeneration, a primary factor for Cole's victory in the previous scenario is his vastly superior attack potency, being able to literally eat through Mercer's supply of biomass to bypass his ability to regenerate and leaving him unable to fight. If their attack potency and durability are treated as equal, however, this method of victory becomes a lot more difficult to achieve. With the added equalization of speed, this will also allow Mercer to more easily close the gap between him and Cole, to use the majority of his offensive powers more effectively. However, Cole's wide variety of evasive powers, agility, and defensive options, such as his force fields and blasts, would still allow him to defend against Mercer's assaults and keep him at bay. Should Mercer attempt to consume Cole, this would likely result in Cole being able to force himself free of Mercer's grip, as Cole is able to resist the effects of the Beast's gravity singularities, which can deconstruct matter and energy on the macro-quantum level and absorb it, such as in the case of Cole's electricity, which is comprised of electrons, which are elementary particles. This resistance should be more than enough to allow Cole to resist the process of consumption, especially given how the Blacklight virus is only confirmed to operate at the molecular level. One easy method of victory for Mercer in this equalized stat scenario is simply to disperse the Blacklight virus from his body to infect Cole. While Cole has resisted highly toxic and deadly substances and diseases before, most notably Sasha's tar, which can induce seizures on contact, turn civilians into zombie creatures, and reduce soldiers to piles of mush. On the other hand, the Blacklight virus is capable of producing hundreds of unique strands of itself on a daily basis, and possesses a 99% mortality rate. Even assuming Cole is capable of resisting a single strain of the virus, Mercer can produce hundreds of unique strains simultaneously. So it is highly unlikely Cole would survive this method of attack, considering he would be inhaling hundreds of strands of a constantly evolving virus which continually produces new strands daily. Not to mention, as seen during the second Blacklight outbreak, he is able to emit a cloud of blacklight from his body which can travel fast enough to quickly infect all of Manhattan through every form of viral transmission. A common point brought up in defense of Cole in a non-power scaling scenario is the fact that Mercer, and the infected as a whole, have bad experiences with electricity. Most notably in Mercer's fight with Specialist Cross, who was able to stop Mercer dead in his tracks and deal far more damage to him than conventional military firepower with an electrical baton. Additionally, in the canonical Wildstorm prequel comic, a hunter was completely obliterated from coming into contact with the third rail of a subway track. And in Prototype 2, a Hydra was able to be subdued by electrical batons similar to Cross's, albeit before Heller's presence agitated it to the point of overpowering them. However, it is possible that Alex can grow resistant to electricity, as he has shown the ability to gradually grow more resistant to elements through repeat exposure, such as the Blood Tox countervirus. Though there are certain phenomena he is unable to adapt to, like the parasite, requiring him to farm a hunter for the necessary antibodies to fight it off. It's really up in the air whether or not Mercer can adapt to electricity on his own, and he's never explicitly shown doing so. Considering all evidence points to Mercer and the infected creatures as a whole being more susceptible to electricity than most other forms of attack, it's very likely Cole's attacks will be highly effective in harming Mercer and easily dispatching any infected he calls to his side. All in all, in an equalized stat match, Cole's prowess in ranged combat, combined with his many defensive and evasive powers, and the infected's susceptibility to electrical attacks, could be enough for Cole to dwindle Alex's biomass reserves and render him unable to fight, even without the advantages of attack potency and speed. On the other hand, with Mercer's superior regeneration, and the ability to produce a city-spanning cloud of hundreds of unique viral strands from his body, could end this fight long beforehand, should he choose to do so. In conclusion, using traditional power scaling methods, Cole absolutely stomps Mercer in power and speed, reducing him to little more than a hunk of biomass before Mercer is even able to react and counterattack in any way, while an equalized stat match provides more of a fair fight in favor of Mercer, as he would likely infect Cole MacGrath with the Blacklight virus long before he could deplete Alex's biomass, either turning him into a runner or simply reducing him to a bloody mass of a corpse in seconds. Thank you guys for watching and bearing with me through the long process it takes to make these types of videos. If you liked my analysis of this fight, or you have your own thoughts on the matter, feel free to comment them below. Right now, I'm trying to get more of these types of power scaling videos, as well as videos regarding character and story analysis out as well. So if you'd like to see more in the future, feel free to subscribe, and I'll talk to you guys later.